Voilà. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Là, on est dans la salle. Tu me reçois? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, test UNTV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, test UNTV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, test UNTV. OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ouais. Un, 2, 3, 4, 5, test canal anglais pour UNTV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, test canal anglais pour UNTV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Test canal anglais pour UNTV. Canal anglais pour UNTV. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Est-ce que c'est bon pour toi? Je sais pas.
Buenos días, Excelencias.
A very good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Committee Against Enforced Disappearances, it's a great pleasure for me to wish you a warm welcome to this annual dialogue with States Party and non-States Party to the International Convention. We're very grateful to you for being here and for the interest you have shown to taking part in this constructive exchange. This meeting is undoubtedly a valuable opportunity to strengthen the frank and cooperative dialogue which underpins the treaty body system upholding human rights at the United Nations. We are brought here by the common goal of preventing and eliminating enforced disappearance, protecting victims, and ensuring that this crime has no succor in any society. We must recognize that we are meeting in a very complex global context, characterized by growing challenges in the sphere of human rights and beleaguered by institutional and financial limitations affecting the UN as a whole. These circumstances shouldn't dispirit us. They should energize us and allow us to redouble our efforts to be more creative and act in a more coordinated fashion. The committee reiterates its commitment to respectful and substantive dialogue in which all voices can be heard. We firmly believe that, including in times of difficulties such as this one, strengthening multilateralism and international cooperation is the most effective route to confront the challenges we all share. I would invite you, in that spirit of openness and collective responsibility, for us to take advantage of this meeting to together explore paths that will allow us to progress towards universalizing the convention and improving the implementation of the treaty, as well as consolidating trust between states, victims, and the international protection mechanisms. We have this morning an agenda which, first of all, allows for the presentation, or introduction rather, of our colleagues who were recently elected at the 8th States Party meeting of this convention and have joined the committee in its work from the outset of this session. So briefly, I will pass the floor to our new colleagues, beginning by Mr. Bambra.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you to our distinguished delegates. My name is Jean de Dieu Bambara from Burkina Faso. I've just been elected and I took up my role this week itself in this committee. It's a great pleasure to be working in the committee and indeed to promote human rights and to ensure that enforced disappearances are brought to an end around the world. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bambara. Madame de Finis, please.
Good morning to everybody. My name is Maria de Finis. I'm coming from Croatia, and it's my great pleasure, honor to be here, especially as I'm not a lawyer. Thank you very much.
El señor.
Mr. Solis, please. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning. My name is Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez. I'm from Panama. I'm a lawyer. It's a privilege and honor to be able to work on this committee where we are tackling such an important issue for the protection of humans and their integrity. I'm also grateful to the States Party for their trust in electing me for this very honorable role. And finally, Madam Banuki, please. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much to all of those present representing the various states. My name's Paulo Vanu from Brazil, and I'm delighted to be here to make a beginning, understand the convention better, to meet colleagues who have long-standing experience, and also to engage with all of those working together on this very particular and difficult challenge at this difficult time, as the chair mentioned, because in our committee, what we're engaged in is the fight to build one of the most central goals that led to the establishment of the United Nations 80 years ago, and that is the search for peace, ultimately. Thank you.
Gracias, Pablo.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Despite the fact that I imagine you know each other, generally speaking, so that you're not at a disadvantage, I will pass the floor to the rest of my colleagues who are former members, obviously, of the committee or of long standing. So, Madam Carmen Rosa, now to introduce herself. A very good morning. This is obviously an excellent opportunity to meet again after so many years with representatives of the states parties. My name is Carmen Rosa Quintana, as the chair mentioned. A warm welcome to you, and I look forward to an excellent working meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen Rosa. Madam Lochbihler, please.
Barbara Lochbihler, I'm a member now, the second term, and I'm also looking forward to discussing and working with you. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Barbara, Mr. Fidelis Kanyongolo, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Fidelis Kanyongolo. I'm from Malawi, Southern Africa. I'm a member of the committee and look forward to constructive engagement with the state parties this morning. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Fidelis. Mr. Mata Diop. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mata Diop from Senegal. Expert member of the committee for 2 mandates now, and I wish a warm welcome to all of the States Party. Thank you. Thank you, Mata. And Mr. Olivier de Fruvel, please. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and a warm welcome to all of the States Party and civil society. My name is Olivier de Fruvel, Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you, Olivier. And my name for my party is Juan Pablo, and pursuant to the vote of trust placed in me by my colleagues at the beginning of this session, I'll be chairing the committee for the next 2 years. We'll just now rapidly describe the activities we're engaged in at the moment, and I'd like to pass the floor to Madam Barbara Lochbihler, who's going to be telling us about our project related to enforced disappearance and transnational repression.
Thank you, Chair. And as you have said, and we all know that there is a serious political and financial crisis, we nevertheless decided in the committee to take on additional thematic work. So we will start working on a statement on enforced disappearances in the context of transnational repression. We discussed with the colleagues from the working group on enforced and involuntary disappearances. So it will be a joint statement. And we look through to transnational repression with the lens of enforced disappearances. This term transnational repression is increasingly being used to describe state actions designed to silence dissent beyond borders. It includes killings, abductions, enforced disappearances, unlawful removals, online and offline intimidation, digital surveillance, including spyware, gender-specific attacks, targeting relatives in the country of origin, abuse of consular services, and misuse of tools such as Interpol's Red Notice. So I assume many of you follow the work of the Office of the High Commissioner, and this office has published a briefing paper on that issue this June, where they describe the term and the definition, and our work will be along this definition. We understand and see this in several country situations which we are discussing, that for victims and their families, transnational enforced disappearances cause profound physical, psychological, and social harm. And we see also on the host side, on the host state side, that such violations not only threaten the safety of the residents, but also undermine sovereignty, erode trust in state institutions, and weaken the credibility of asylum and refugee protection systems. So we are at the beginning of working on this document, and we try in the coming years to finalize this statement also. And of course, you are invited to contribute to this discussion. And at the end of this week, we will have a kind of a concept paper and an outline along which we will draft this statement. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Barbara. We're also currently working, as you know, on the process to adopt our second general comment. And for an update on that, I'll pass the floor to Madam Carmen Rosa Quintana. Thank you, Chairperson. The Committee Against Enforced Disappearance, working pursuant to its various working methods, has observed that enforced disappearance has a gender dimension, which needs to have greater visibility. We took, therefore, the decision to move forwards with a draft on a general comments on women, girls, and enforced disappearance. We had an initial concept note that was presented in the 28th session, and that was adopted at that time. And from May to June of this year, on the 15th then of July, we put out a call for expressions of interest from all interested stakeholders, so that we could conflate that input towards a general comment. And I think what the response was very important, very welcome. We had a lot of contributions, and they revolved around the following issues: prevention, search, investigation, persecution, participation, protection, and reparations. And I should emphasize that the contributions particularly came in the majority from the Mesoamerican region, both Central America and the Caribbean. And we had an initial regional consultation on the 3rd of September, and I'd like to thank all of the organizations that participated in that discussion. It was a very rich, full-throated discussion, and it was very important for us to personally hear what the key concerns are of women and girls around the subject of enforced disappearance. There are elements that are important to pick out here, and they need developing in forthcoming consultations. These will focus on the following: identifying contexts, lessons learned, and the general recommendations. We received 478 recommendations from academia, universities, and the different sectors. And the idea here would be that each region where we carry out consultations will specifically express the way it would like the comment tailored to its area in their recommendations. And we're working hand in glove with the OHCHR as well in local offices in each of the regions. Very soon, also, we will have meetings and regional consultations with Europe and with the MENA region. We will also meet with Asia. So that will be in October, the forthcoming month. And then in November, we will have consultations with South America and Africa. And we do hope we'll be able to produce an initial draft based on on the concept note, so first draft of the general comments, and place that at the disposal of the whole committee in March. And we hope we will have our next session then, despite the limited resources that we are obviously having allocated to us, unfortunately, by the United Nations. Notwithstanding that, we hope we can make a very positive contribution to come up with a general comment which will specifically lead to 3 goals. The first of those goals is for us to tackle, with a gender perspective, the intersectional context experienced by women and girls who are victims of enforced disappearances. And I'm talking about whether or not they've disappeared themselves or whether or not they are searching for loved ones. And that we understand the specific challenges in enjoying their rights for that group. And then thirdly, that we understand in depth how the Convention on Enforced Disappearances can best be placed at the disposal of those victims. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen Rosa. And finally, also, I wanted to tell you that in terms of thematic work, during this session, the committee decided to continue with its process to potentially adopt its general comments on sexual identity and enforced disappearance. This relates to the frequency with which that phenomenon crops up and also the register of cases of individuals belonging to different identity groups and certain increased risk factors for those individuals to be victims of enforced disappearance, as well as challenges for them in terms of accessing justice and their participation in search activities, along with the specific challenges in human identification when dealing with people belonging to different sexual identity groups, and also the requirement to understand how the notion of victim can change for different types of families, not only biologically related families, and identify types of, for example, misgendering, which can lead to mistakes in the search and reparation process. And to that, I would add that the committee intends to tackle how social perception can play a key role in terms of people belonging to different sexual identity groups in both the search and identification process. And finally, the committee will be wanting to lay down some key principles which need to be taken into account in cases of disappearance of people belonging to different identity groups, precisely around the issue of search, reparation, and identification of remains. And I'm sure following our next session, we will be putting out a call for contributions. And following that, we do hope that states will participate and give us relevant information so that we can build our arguments, and we'll obviously have our door open to all relevant stakeholders, civil society, victims, groups, academics, and other UN agencies or other international organizations, indeed, that might have a particular stake in building a raft of principles in this area, but also will be able to contribute undoubtedly to constructing those principles. Now, looking beyond our activities around investigation and thematic work, the committee will, of course, continue to comply with the mandates enshrined in Articles 29 and following of the Convention relating to reviewing initial reports and additional information submitted by states in line with Article 29. We will also continue to provide follow-up to urgent actions and to work on the register of urgent actions in line with Article 30 of the Convention. We will continue to receive individual communications, and that as regards those states that have already recognized the committee's competence to receive them. And on that note, it's perhaps worth once again extending the invitation to those states party that are present who haven't yet done so, for them to accept the committee's competence to receive individual communications and interstate communications under Articles 31 and 32 of the Convention, bearing in mind that this discussion around individual cases can also become a key tool for states to implement their obligations nationally, but it also allows us to develop our jurisprudence, which can subsequently be used by other states, even though the case doesn't explicitly refer to them. With regards to the visit mandate, unfortunately, the budgetary limitations have meant that despite the fact that we have 2 visits that have been accepted by Honduras and Burkina Faso right now, we can't actually carry them out, and we have no guarantee as to when that can happen. Finally, as is public knowledge, we have a very profound process going on concerning the application of Article 24, which is underway. And that I'd like to also tell you a little bit about the first Global Congress on Enforced Disappearance, which took place in January, and what the outcomes are, the plans that have been made to comply with the the commitments rather made by the different actors during that conference. And I'll pass the floor to Mr. Olivier de Fruvel to go into a little more detail in that connection. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Well, as the majority of you already know, the first Global Congress on Enforced Disappearance took place on the 15th and 16th of January last, here in Geneva. It was the outcome of a process that had took place over several months, regional consultations, both with states and civil society organizations, as well as victims organizations, and it provided an opportunity to garner an unprecedented dynamic mobilizing of all actors who are involved with this issue. At the end of the day, the goal was really to launch or to relaunch a global movement against enforced disappearance, which is really of a similar standing to the original adoption of the convention in 2006. It led to, obviously, and the intention was to sound a note of hope in the challenging days we're experiencing. And there was a great deal of resilience and strength demonstrated at that conference to fight enforced disappearance and bolster human rights. And what struck all participants was victims' messages that came through the different panels. And that was both a message of love and determination. Thanks to the co-sponsors of the Congress and the commitment of the various partners, in large part, we managed to overcome the challenging context, and the outcomes of the conference exceeded expectations. There were 1,400 participants online, 118 countries represented, civil society organizations as well, 82 victims organizations, 76 others that were present. And what doesn't come across with the figures is the robustness of the testimony and also the pledges that came through, because the committee was organized, or the Congress was organized around a number of action plans which were being proposed to the different stakeholders. They were being asked to undertake concrete commitments, because we're not just talking about debating. When we come together to meet and to understand one another mutually, we also want to shoulder commitments for the future and put our money where our mouths are. And that's why the Congress, as with others, was really aimed at that outcome. 16 states, 25 civil society organizations, 2 NHRIs, and 4 academic organizations answered that call. The list is still open, and it's still possible for actors to make commitments in terms of our action plan. A number of key actions were identified and launched during the closing session of the Congress, and I'll just cite them here quickly. Establishing a victims network in sub-Saharan Africa. First of all, this is the only region where currently there is no civil society and victims organization network dedicated to enforced disappearance, establishing as well a young persons global network on enforced disappearance, because it's very important in a number of countries to ensure that there will be people to take over. Also organizing a network of women's meetings to tackle enforced disappearances, follow up on enforced disappearance, the promotion of the ratification of the convention, and capacity building for civil society organizations to facilitate their interaction with protection mechanisms. So those are the key activities that were identified, particularly through regional workshops which took place around the Congress. And a number of activities since January have already been undertaken. There have been some conferences. There was an expert seminar that took place here in Geneva to ensure follow-up vis-a-vis the commitments on combating impunity, but there remains a lot to be done. a great deal indeed. And I would say that to date, the key commitments that were identified during the Congress have not yet been subject to significant initiatives in terms of tackling them. And obviously, we want to shoulder that challenge today. We need to stop talking and act on our convictions, and what was said during the Congress, as well as the ceremony which took place just recently in New York, there were no new ratifications announced on those occasions. We have a deadline, if you like, and a goal, December 2026, because that will be the 20th anniversary of the convention when the General Assembly takes place then, and that will be the opportunity to have an update on the implementation of these commitments. And so I think there needs to be an energetic call to broaden the group of friends of the convention and the states parties of the convention. There are a number of states who may join the group, who are in the pipeline to strengthen the group of friends, in fact, and might be able to carry that ratification campaign forwards. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you, Olivier. Just to wrap up these statements, we'll then move on to the dialogue, which of course is the most interesting part of this sort of meeting. I wanted to say something about the follow-up to the chair's meeting and say something about the impact of the liquidity crisis on the work of our committee. I will be handing the floor back again to Olivier de Fouville, and I will complement what he has to say after his initial statement.
Oui, merci.
Thank you again. Thank you for giving me the floor. As you know, the chairpersons met. It was their 37th meeting in June last. It was a meeting which was largely devoted to the current state of affairs, characterized by the liquidity crisis, the cash crisis within the UN, which of course has a huge impact in the UN and all its activities, but a disproportionate impact on the human rights protection system, given the fact that, unlike other pillars of the UN, we're perhaps at the lowest level in budgetary terms anyway. The third pillar of the UN organization got 6.6% of the regular budget. So this liquidity crisis is impacting the work of the UN broadly. It was already present in 2024. It's really exacerbated in 2025, and it will probably get worse in 2026. Specifically, well, we've had the cancelling of the third week of our committee meetings broadly, and the pre-session meetings as well. Also cancellation of visits, and this affects all. We've got 35 reviews that were supposed to be done. Many communications will actually never get to the stage of them being recorded even over the next few years. In other words, it's the very working of the treaty bodies that's profoundly affected. And let's look at the impact on the ground of this, not just the treaty bodies themselves. This is something which will have a real impact on protection of human rights on the ground. On our committee, so 2 visits weren't held, no prospect for additional funding for our urgent actions, which I would recall actually saves lives. The chairpersons in the meeting are well aware of the situation, they're well aware of the challenges ahead, and they are shouldering their responsibilities. And we are doing that. We propose some exceptional measures for the committees that could be taken in order to at least keep going the regular activity of our committees. And of course, it would be useful for states also to contribute to ensure that there is going to be the survival of the treaty body system. Many thanks. Thank you, Olivier, says the chair. Very briefly, just some ideas to complement what's just been said and also what Paolo has had to say. As we've heard, we're commemorating 80 years of our existence. One of the greater achievements of the UN over the last 8 years was creating human rights norms across the globe. All states party to the UN organization have ratified at least one of those treaties, and many states have ratified several treaties. In fact, most of them have ratified several. Those bodies that have been created are a system. They're independent of each other, but it's a legal, independent, apolitical system focused on the objective oversight and compliance with these obligations voluntarily entered into, but they are also a key tool for the prevention of human rights violations. And the UN system, and let's not forget this is the creation of the states themselves, need to ensure that they are not weakened, particularly given a current context where we're seeing a real backsliding in human rights protection. And it is precisely because of that, we're commemorating the 80th year, the 80th anniversary of the UN. I think all the more reason to commemorate this, and what better way than protecting the human rights system. And we need to complete this strengthening that we did. The chairpersons meeting, in their meeting, also regretted the fact that in 2024, in the Assembly, there was no decisive resolution which would allow us to continue to strengthen the treaty bodies under 61268. No timetable, no predictable timetable for reviews, no predictability for funding for their activities. And as we know, the treaty bodies have different mandates, and that was a wasted opportunity. It meant we're not able to be more efficient, but at the same time, we need to continue the level of efficiency we've had so far. As far as our committee, less than other treaty bodies. In all treaty bodies, there is a backlog. And also predictability of the system is at stake because of this situation. Just to conclude this part of my statement, on behalf of the committee, I wanted to very respectfully convey to states parties, please, let's go back to the discussion. Let's continue to strengthen the treaty bodies, work together, come up with structural solutions rather than just one-off ones that guarantee the sustainability and effectiveness of treaty bodies. And this runs to the benefit, of course, to humanity. It's a way of commemorating and celebrating these 80 years of defense of peace. So that's what we've got on our side. We would now like to give you the floor, delegations, to delegations of states. I think this is going to the most enriching part of our meeting. We always look forward to our dialogue with the state parties.
Mexico.
Mexico, you have the floor.
¿Me escuchan, verdad? Sí.
Can you hear me? Very good morning. Thank you, Chair. And I'd very much like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the committee. And we congratulate you on your appointment. And also congratulations to the new members of the committee who've been elected. Mexico is one of the most open countries, open to international scrutiny, and that collaborates greatly with the human rights system. We are party to the 9 UN human rights conventions. We're active members of the Inter-American system, and we give prompt follow-up to all requests stemming from these mechanisms and the special procedures. And we have extended an open invitation to them to visit our country. Since 2008, which is when we ratified the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances, my country has cooperated permanently with the committee. We're the first state to welcome an in loco visit. We have punctually submitted our periodic reports, responded to communications, and addressed urgent actions. In addition to that, In 2020, Mexico became one of the very rare 30 states that recognize the competence of the committee to receive and examine individual communications as per Article 31 of the Convention. As regards the procedure started on the basis of Article 34, and given the spirit of cooperation, my country has punctually and in detailed fashion provided an answer to the request for information coming from the committee. Although we have expressed our disagreement with the decision of the committee, we have still assumed this procedure with the same seriousness and sense of responsibility that characterizes our international commitments. We're doing this because we're convinced that this is an opportunity to show that you are dealing with a state that is decided, resolved to combat, and with openness and cooperation, this complex challenge of transnational organized crime, always putting at the center of our work victims and their relatives. We recognize the magnitude of the problem. We do not deny the challenges, but we also robustly state that the Mexican state does not allow, permit, or order enforced disappearances, and we will continue to redouble efforts to eradicate this. We really appreciate the role of the committee in implementing the convention, which is why we echo what's established by the International Law Commission. Interpretation of a treaty body cannot replace the agreement of states parties to a convention, nor of itself and in and of itself can it turn into ulterior practice, which would modify the meaning of a treaty. As the chair of the committee has said, for Mexico, it's fundamental we strengthen the trust of states parties, encourage more countries to join this legal instrument, which we believe is fundamental. Distinguished members of the committee, in the case of Mexico, there is no generalized nor systematic practice of enforced disappearance. Legal, institutional, and forensic progress, and our policies on search and care for victims pay tribute and attest to the commitment of the state to address this offence with determination. We want to have a full, transparent cooperation with the committee. We believe that respectful and joint work and dialogue and not confrontation are essential to strengthen the convention and ensure truth, justice, and reparation for victims. We share the concern of the committee on the impact that the financial crisis has had on the treaty bodies. The human rights pillar has always been the one that got the least level of funding. We're actively involved in the UN 80 to preserve the UN as part of these restrictions. These are complex challenges we all have to adapt to, rise to this challenge, ensure the effectiveness of the treaty bodies, and we will actively participate in that process. Many thanks.
Gracias.
Thank you. Could you just turn your nameplate so I can actually see who we're talking to? Thank you. Uruguay, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Uruguay would like to thank the committee for convening this annual meeting to states parties to the Convention Against Enforced Disappearance and the update on your work and the themes that you're working on as well. And also we welcome the new members of the committee. I want to restate our national commitment to the human rights protection system and our support for the treaty bodies and its independence. We have complied with recommendations from the committee as per Article 29 and 4 of your convention. The state last week submitted information requested regarding the concluding observations in terms of investigation, search, and reparation. Uruguay is committed to the right to truth, justice, memory, reparation, non-repetition, and also our participation in this first World Congress, which was held in Geneva, and the commitments we entered into then. I think that testifies to our commitment. What the Committee of Experts does as an oversight body, it's vital in its role, and we support it to carry out collaborative and cooperative work in order to combat the scourge of enforced disappearances. We, of course, are concerned at the liquidity crisis within the system. It's very important that the treaty body system has sufficient human resources as well as financial in order to carry out its functions. We need to avoid the weakening of this protection system, as indeed the chair said. At the same time, we believe that the treaty body system must be strengthened by harmonizing working methods between committees whilst preserving their independence. We are committed to multilateralism and international cooperation to address the current challenges, and we are participating actively in the UN 80 initiative, looking at the reforms as proposed by the Secretary General. Many thanks.
Gracias.
Thank you, Brazil.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Brazil appreciates this opportunity to share its perspectives on the different manifestations of enforced disappearance and on measures undertaken nationally to prevent and combat this serious human rights violation. In our experience, enforced disappearances have taken three forms. First, the disappearance of political opponents during the military dictatorship from 1964 until 1985. Second, contemporary cases often involving agents of state, security forces, but also linked to organized crime and militias. And third, other disappearances not directly connected to state violence. So regarding the first, the political disappearance of opponents, Brazil has taken important steps in the pursuit of truth and justice. The Special Commission on Political Deaths and Disappearances, established in 1995 under Fernando Henrique Cardoso's presidency, was reactivated in July 2024 and resumed its mandate to locate and identify victims. In December last year, the National Council of Justice adopted what we call Resolution 601, requiring that death certificates of victims of political repression explicitly state that the cause of death was violent and perpetrated by the Brazilian state. This responds to long-standing demands from families and civil society for recognition, reparation, and the right to truth and memory. Earlier this year, Brazil also welcomed the visit of the Special Rapporteur on Truth, Justice, Reparation, and Guarantees of Non-Recurrence, Mr. Bernard Duhem, underscoring the importance we attach to this agenda. And in this context, that Brazil is particularly honored to note that former Human Rights Minister Paulo Vanucci has recently joined this committee. His long-standing engagement in the struggle for truth, justice, and reparation for the victims of the dictatorship has been central to Brazil's progress in addressing this legacy. As to contemporary enforced disappearances, Brazil acknowledges their disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups, particularly Afro-descendant persons in low-income communities. To confront this challenge, we have strengthened cooperation with UN human rights mechanisms, including the 2023 visit of the EMLER and the 2024 visit of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. Brazil ratified the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance in 2010 and presented its report to the committee in 2021. Parliamentary procedures are underway with a view to recognizing the competence of the committee to receive individual communications under Article 31, in line with the commitment made at the World Congress on Enforced Disappearances earlier this year here in Geneva. At the regional level, Brazil ratified the Inter-American Convention on Enforced Disappearance in 2013 and continues to engage constructively with the Inter-American human rights system. All of these initiatives, Mr. President, reflect Brazil's firm commitment to addressing the issue of enforced disappearance. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Many thanks. Spain, you have the floor. Chair, thank you for giving me the floor. We'd like to thank the Committee on Enforced Disappearances for the exhaustive information that they have provided us with on their activities. We were one of the first countries in Europe to ratify the convention. We're convinced that the work you do is absolutely key to ensure the respect and protection of human rights when we're seeing flagrant violation of these rights. And we're seeing this is constantly on the increase rather than decreasing. We welcome the attention that you're giving to the gender issues. Women who are victims of disappearances, they are also key players in terms of search and reparation. We also take note with a great deal of interest on the information you've given us, to the attention you are giving to this, and the attention you're giving to transnational repression, and we're seeing this as a worrying trend. We welcome the very success of the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearances in January last, Geneva. A large number of civil society and victims participated, and we believe that this initiative has shown how useful it is to renew the global commitment to this, and we share with the committee the impression that this needs to be followed through. As others have said, Spain is concerned at the serious difficulties of the budget crisis in the UN and the impact that that is having on the work of the treaty bodies and, of course, in your committee, although perhaps to a lesser extent to other treaty bodies. As part of Spain's commitment to multilateralism, we will continue to support the international human rights protection system and the work of the treaty bodies so that they can carry out their mandate and ensure their full independence, because it's absolutely vital, as the committee has said. This is the key work of what you do, and it's very important to be able to provide justice and reparation to victims. We're convinced that clarifying truth, providing justice and reparation for victims are key elements strengthening our democracies. We are committed to combating impunity. For instance, as part of the current Human Rights Council session, we've, together with the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killing, we have promoted a side event on the importance of forensic work to combat impunity as part of transitional justice context as well. We share the feeling that concerted action, the key role of this committee in the 20th anniversary of your committee, is so important, which is why we'd like to restate our commitment to the full implementation and to advocate for its universalization. Thank you. The Chair, thank you, Cambodia.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committees, the Royal Government of Cambodia extends its appreciation to the committee for the constructive dialogue held on our initial report under Article 29 of the Conventions. We have carefully noted the committee's concluding observations. Cambodia remains steadfast in its commitments to the promotion and protection of human rights, as evident by our ratifications of 8 core international human rights treaties and the Rome Statute. We welcome the committee recognitions of the positive steps we have taken. This includes the incorporation of enforced disappearance as a crime against humanity in our criminal code, the enactment of the law on mutual legal assistance, and the establishment of key national committees to combat torture and human trafficking. The recommendations provided offer the valuable roadmap for further strengthening our legal and institutional framework. In this spirit, we wish to highlight our ongoing effort. First, on behalf of the Royal Government of Cambodia, I wish to reaffirm our strong will and unwavering commitments to the full and effective implementations of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. Second, following the adoption of the committee's concluding observations in March 2024, Cambodia has taken immediate steps to ensure the wide disseminations and to initiate a process of follow-up. The Cambodian Human Rights Committees, as the national focal point, has distributed the concluding observations to all relevant ministries and institutions with a view to facilitating coordinated actions and concrete implementations. Third, furthermore, in collaboration with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioners for Human Rights in Cambodia, the Cambodian Human Rights Committees organized a national workshop to disseminate the concluding observations. The workshop benefited from the participations of Madame Barbara Lutz-Bissler, the distinguished members of the committees, along with the representative from the Senate, the National Assembly, diplomatic missions, relevant ministry and institutions, and civil society organizations. This event reflects Cambodia's commitments to inclusive dialogue, transparency, and multi-stakeholder engagement in addressing the recommendation of the committees. 4, we commit to provide the committees with specific and updated information on our progress in implementing these recommendations by the deadline of 1st March 2027. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, Cambodia views the recommendation of the committees not as criticism, but as a constructive guidance. We will continue to engage closely with the committees, with the OHCHR, and with all national and international partners to ensure that our implementation of the convention is effective and consistent with our international obligations. Cambodia remains committed to ensuring that enforced disappearance will never be tolerated and that rights, dignity, and freedom of all persons are fully protected. We thank the committee for its continued support and constructive partnership and look forward to reporting on our progress in due course. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Finland.
Mr. Chair, Finland fully... Finland would like to thank the committee for organizing this valuable informal meeting with the state parties. We appreciate the possibility to exchange views with the committee. We would like to thank Mr. Furwell for his work as the chair of the committee and would also like to congratulate you, Chair, for your election as the new chairperson of the committee. We also warmly welcome all the new members. Finland fully supports the work of the treaty bodies, including your committee. We believe that the work of the treaty bodies contributes to the development of international human rights law and help us clarify the scope and meaning of human rights standards and to foster international consensus on human rights standards. In our view, the Convention is an important part of the international human rights framework, as enforced disappearances are a serious human rights violation and continue to be a significant human rights concern. Finland was pleased to ratify the Convention in 2023 and has submitted its first report to the committee in April 2025. We look forward to receiving the list of issues as well as to the future interactive dialogue with the committee. We welcome warmly your initiative to draft a general comment on women, girls, and enforced disappearances. We also welcome warmly your initiatives related to transnational repression and sexual and gender diversities, and would be interested to hear more on these specific initiatives. We are extremely concerned, as my colleagues, about the impact of the liquidity crisis on the work of the treaty bodies. Treaty bodies are the backbone of the UN human rights system and must be a priority in terms of institutional capacity and funding. A strong and credible treaty body system is essential for the legitimacy of the UN human rights framework. We would like to hear more on the practical measures taken by the committee and OHCHR due to the liquidity crisis and on your assessment of the impact of the liquidity crisis to the work of your committee and to the human rights protection on the ground. Thank you.
Gracias. Oman.
Thank you. Oman.
رئيس وأسعد الله أوقاتكم جميعا بكل خير.
Good morning, everyone. Allow me to start by congratulating you, sir, on your election to the chairmanship of this committee. I'd also like to extend a welcome to the new members of the committee, and I wish your committee all success. We'd very much like to thank the Committee on Enforced Disappearances for having convened this annual meeting. It is a very important one. the 29th session of this meeting. Today, we can renew our attachment to international human rights, and we'd like to thank the committee for the efforts deployed to address the crime of enforced disappearances. We also appreciate the efforts made by the committee regarding monitoring and follow-up regarding the implementation of the convention, and indeed assessment of the challenges that still affect how we can combat enforced disappearances. We welcome the World Congress that was held on enforced disappearances, particularly since it led to very important recommendations. The Sultanate of Oman has always done its utmost to address the crime of enforced disappearances as part of our full respect for human rights. We robustly respect the rights of individuals, human rights, as well as physical integrity. Policies have been adopted to materialize these principles. I would like to mention the following. Oman has submitted its first report pursuant to the convention, where we were able to set out a range of measures adopted by my country. We also have cooperated closely and transparently with the committee. This is something which has led to a great deal of correspondence and transparency there. We would like to take this opportunity to renew our firm attachment to the principles of the convention and renew our attachment to close cooperation with the committee, with states who are party to it, in order to protect everyone from enforced disappearances. It's a question of strengthening the rule of law, respect for human rights. Combating this crime requires a pooling of efforts, exchange of experiences, strengthening international mechanisms as well as prevention, and to provide justice. We'd like to stress the importance of addressing the relevant issues in order to combat these crimes. If necessary, it's absolutely vital to provide justice for victims and ensure that reparation is provided. Chair, enforced disappearances are one of the most serious and painful crimes which can impact humans. It's not just a question of the victims suffering from this. No, you have relatives, the family members of the victims, an entire community. This leaves indelible traces, even socially, not just at family level. So combating this crime means that we need to strengthen the human rights culture in society. That requires awareness raising, as well as mainstreaming that in our school and university curricula, in order to ensure that there is proper implementation of these laws. We also need to strengthen our member states' cooperation with the committee in order to achieve the overarching goal, which is the total eradication of this crime. By way of conclusion, the Sultanate of Oman would like to renew its readiness to cooperate with the committee, with our international partners as well, in order to underpin the efforts made to achieve the goal of the convention for the best of humanity, and to ensure that human rights are respected and attain the shared goals to have a world where there is no enforced disappearance. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Iraq.
Thank you very much, Iraq.
السيد رئيس وأعضاء اللجنة.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, committee members. May the peace of God be upon you. I'd like to convey to you the greetings of the Iraqi Human Rights Commission, and on their behalf wish you all the very best in this session. That commission deals with all human rights in Iraq and was established pursuant to Law 53 of 2008. And Iraq has also ratified your convention. This was in 2010. Iraq played host to the committee in 2022, and the Human Rights Commission also has drafted a number of reports on the subject, the latest of which goes back to just 2024. My country has undergone a number of conflicts and tensions since the 1980s, and this has led to a number of cases of enforced disappearance. This is why this area is a key priority for Iraq. This represents also a priority in the work of the Human Rights Commission in Iraq. In order to tackle this area, it's essential for us to have a solid, robust legal basis, and as a result, the appropriate legislation to tackle this area. The legislation that we have in place in Iraq oftentimes goes back more than 50 years and is not up to the job to deal with this modern phenomenon. This is why we have highlighted the importance of adopting a law specifically tailored to combating enforced disappearance. We have a bill of law that's been submitted to our ministerial council in Iraq for its approval at the moment. The Commission also has worked to ensure that it is given the mandate of having oversight of this law so that it has conferred to it the full responsibility for following up on enforced disappearance. We have a particular member within the Commission to manage that process, and it's very important to tackle this area. We feel that we have that joined up approach. We have a number of authorities in Iraq responsible for arrest and detention, and we work with those authorities to establish registers, and we're also rolling out specialized training in this regard. So we wish the committee all the very best, and we reiterate that the Human Rights Commission in Iraq, as a body responsible for following up on human rights, will continue to monitor this very closely. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Perú.
Thank you very much. Peru has the floor. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this very important meeting. We believe that the humanitarian search efforts don't only honor the memory of victims, but they contribute to truth, reconciliation, and the strengthening of democracy and human rights. Peru recognizes and particularly appreciates the key role played by this committee in promoting international standards to support states in the implementation of effective measures to prevent and eliminate enforced disappearance. The committee's recommendations doubtlessly provide a key cornerstone in building our public policies and carrying out institutional capacity building. And in that vein, we reiterate our commitment to welcoming those recommendations in a constructive vein and translating them into concrete actions to support the families of victims and society as a whole. We therefore would like to express our commitment to share good practice and lessons learned. And in that connection, I'd like to highlight that efforts in my country have been characterized not only by legal progress in terms of the framework, but a national search plan up to 2030 for the disappeared, which seeks to prioritize a humanitarian approach and an intercultural and gender perspective to support families of the disappeared during the search process. What this means is that our key aim is to provide answers for families concerning the whereabouts of their disappeared loved ones during the period of violence from 1980 to 2000. The General Directorate for Searching for the Disappeared is responsible for implementing this plan and is also responsible for administering the National Disappeared Persons Register. According to that register, until August 2025, we have recorded more than 22,000 disappeared during that period of violence that the country underwent between 1980 and 2000. Those are now recorded in the register, and recently Peru has made other key progress. Between 2022 and 2025, we've provided psychosocial support to almost 4,000 families, including material and logistic support for nearly 2,000 families in compliance with our national legislation. We've also drafted more than 1,300 humanitarian investigation reports to provide families with information concerning the final fate or whereabouts of their loved ones. These activities are carried out in close collaboration with the Home Office and the Ministry of Health, and it draws on our genetic database, which is key for the identification of victims. Despite challenges, Peru is firmly committed to tackling the uncertainty and fear of families, and in that connection we reiterate our preparedness to continue to cooperate with this committee and the entire international community as we progress towards identifying all victims of enforced disappearance. Finally, I would highlight that we're actively participating in the UN 80 activity. Thank you very much. Thank you. Colombia. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson and distinguished committee members. Allow me to take this opportunity to repeat our thanks to the committee for the visit which took place between November and December of 2024, as well as for the key comments and observations that were made in the visit report. On the 30th of April this year, recently, in fact, and they have given rise to additional comments made by us within the 4-month time frame that was given to us for that, which came to an end at the end of August. These comments and recommendations are of extreme importance because of the seriousness of the crime of enforced disappearance committed in Colombia in previous years, and in the face of which Colombian society and institutions have pulled out all of the stops in order to recognize this as a crime and to put in place policies to prevent it, as well as to ensure justice is done as regards proven cases. These cases are of a significant scale. The report rightly calls attention to the challenge of establishing an accurate number of victims. And this is something we've been working on because the figures that we're dealing with in Colombia kind of go from between 20 and 30,000. We're talking about large numbers, but very broad brushstrokes. And the National Search Unit has just published in July of this year a report in which it updates these figures. And the quantity of 132,000, just over 132,000, has been stipulated in that report. That's the number of disappearances, the total. And that relates to the review of 21 individual databases in different institutions, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace and the Victims Unit, and the significant increase in requests for search with 50,802 new requests for searches concerning alleged cases of enforced disappearance. And so that figure of disappeared people registered went at that point to up to 132,000. So it went up, jumped up even more. Now, this is not a process which we deem to be concluded. We will continue to carry out the necessary activities to provide even more input and understand more fully this universe of disappeared persons. But this is the most accurate data that we have at the moment following very intense work in this regard. Various state entities are working right now on identifying the avenues for putting in practice the very valuable recommendations made by the committee. on the basis of this, allow me to share with you a number of recent findings which have cropped up in this sphere. They're not sufficient in of themselves to tackle enforced disappearance in Colombia, but they do demonstrate the efforts being made by Colombian state and society in this connection. On the 26th of September, this is a very significant date in this area because a number of things happened on that date. First of all, the search unit of disappeared persons found and identified 2 bodies of disappeared persons in San Jose and Calamar. And also on that date, there was an identification of 2 other bodies on the Panamanian border. For its turn, the peace unit continued its activities in an area known as Escombrera. So this is a place where which was used to deposit and hide the bodies of the disappeared, and it's thought there's a lot of people that were hidden there. And the special peace jurisdiction as well in September found on this same date found an additional body. And actually that led to the finding of 7 victims being located in that same location in Medellin that I've been talking about. But independently of that, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, which was the court that was established pursuant to the peace agreements in 2016, and whose mandate is to bring justice to bear vis-a-vis the offences committed during the armed conflict, carried out, or issued rather, on the 16th and 17th September, 2 historic rulings which relate to restorative justice in connection to these events. The first of these rulings relate to serious crimes committed by 7 members of the Secretariat of the Armed Forces the mobilized group at the time that was responsible for these events, and they were found to be responsible for a number of offences, including enforced disappearance, and they were sentenced, and also that included reparation obligations vis-a-vis victims, and included the identification by them of the disappeared and the bodies of those who have been disappeared. So these are specific rulings relating to the individuals that were found to be responsible by the special peace jurisdiction. The penalty isn't to deprive them of their freedom, it's to oblige them to carry out restorative functions and roles in order to support the process of recovery for their victims. And it includes demonstrating genuine will to contribute to peace and human rights. And to initiate these particular sentences, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace prioritized the identification of people considered disappeared in the cemetery in a place called Palmyra in the Cauca department. And following that, they continued to pursue other projects based on that research. In addition, 2 days later, the Special Unit Jurisdiction for Peace issued its second ruling that I mentioned. This concerns 2 events related to the armed conflict, where it sentenced 2 former members of the military forces responsible for extrajudicial executions. This is an offence which also is something that's very closely involved in many of the enforced disappearance cases. These are known as false positives inappropriately in Colombia. So these are civilians that are murdered by the military, or perhaps the paramilitary views, or the one with the compliance of the other. It can be either way around. So these are civilians who have been recorded falsely as combatants who died in combat, but this is not the case. What happens is they're murdered and then they're dressed following their death as soldiers or as combatants in order to record them erroneously. And in this second ruling, the 12 members of the military forces who are recognized of committing these offences were held responsible in relation to 135 civilians. And they were committed to work on 6 restorative projects. These projects were established with the participation of victims, and they were mandated by the Special Peace Jurisdiction units. These are examples of significant progress we've seen in Colombia to confront this very serious scourge, this violation of human rights, which has so awfully impacted our society for more than 40 or 50 years now, and out of which we hope to be able to make a courageous and valiant exit with the help of this committee, of course, the Committee on Enforced Disappearance. And once again, we thank it for its incredibly important work. Thank you. The Chair, thank you very much to Colombia. There's no more requests for the floor from the states. So allow me now to ask whether or not my colleagues on the committee would like to respond to anything that's been said, to the points made by the states. Okay, I don't have any requests for the floor from my colleagues either. So allow me on behalf of the committee to share a few comments. The first thing is to recognize that the fact that you're here with us in this room is a demonstration of significant commitment to the committee's work as it complies with its international obligations and responds to the requirements and expectations of victims, and that needs to be celebrated. I think in the 4 years I've been on this committee, for the first time I can see significant participation, significant observations from states, and that really needs to be very warmly welcomed. The scale of the problem of enforced disappearance the world over continues to be enormous. The contexts vary significantly, and the perspective shared by Brazil is very apposite with regards to the different historic moments and the different context in which enforced disappearance occurs. But the diversity of the phenomenon, I think, should motivate us to be more creative and to work side by side to be able to address the reality of the problem. Obviously, in our work to provide hope to victims and to provide them with truth and justice, which a number of delegations have raised very insistently, that is, of course, the most legitimate cornerstone for us to work towards to support those who have experienced this terrible offence. I also want to highlight the number of statements alluded to cooperation not only with this body, but also between states. The good practices which have been created by a number of countries around the world need to be shared, and also the negative experiences which might have been had are equally relevant so that we can create better tools to approach investigation and search, as well as reparation processes internally. Exchanging information in contexts where disappearance is more frequent, for example, on migratory routes, the context of transnational repression, which we're working on now, that requires a joined up response. And oftentimes disappearances perpetrated by organized crime groups are planned in one state, they're executed in a second state, and often finally play out in a third state. And that's something which we're increasingly aware of, and it requires connected cooperation between states. And a number of you mentioned that, and a number of you have also made significant commitments to cooperate with other states party on that, and with states that are not parties as well, because I think this point of collaboration between states is to do as well with demonstrating to states that have not yet committed to the Convention how important it is to do so, and the very valuable tool that the Convention provides us with to combat enforced disappearance. Of course, we've been telling you about progress with the thematic projects we've decided to undertake, and without prejudice to that, of course, we are very keen and are very committed to working on Articles 29 and subsequent, the core mandate, independently of any restrictions that we're dealing with in terms of the liquidity crisis. But I do appreciate, and I think all my colleagues do as well, appreciate the commitments made by a number of the states in their statements to ensure that the United Nations human rights system, not only the treaty bodies, but the entire mechanism does have the necessary resources to continue to work efficiently, and that we're not simply trying to provide a fig leaf exercise here, that those mechanisms need to actually undertake appropriate, robust work. So to conclude, once again, I'd like to extend an invitation to keep this space for conversation open. That is to say that if we meet just once a year, because the committee just sits twice a year, that doesn't mean that we don't have the opportunity for permanent exchanges with states to allow us to work better. And at the end of the day, support you, which is, of course, our role. We're not only assessing how you implement the treaty, we want to be there to support you in your implementation processes of the treaty. I think we all in the committee have positive experiences of activities, academic or technical support, or webinars that have been organized on the request of the governments of the different states, not only states party, but non-states party, that have led to victims having a better response. And so I want to convey again to you that the committee stands ready to be at your service and be at the service of victims. And we hope this will be the beginning of a conversation and not just a single isolated conversation. Once again, I'd like to ask my colleagues whether or not they'd like to make any comment at the current time. Okay, if there are no more requests for the floor, then we'll adjourn the session. Thank you.
Buenos días.
Very good morning. Dear friends, colleagues, members of the committee, and distinguished representatives of CSO and victims associations, on behalf of the Committee Against Enforced Disappearance, warm welcome to the dialogue as part of our session. For us, meeting you is not just a formality, it's a key moment because you, the victims, representatives, are the raison d'etre of our committee and convention. We're well aware that we're facing very difficult, complex times. The UN is facing a financial institutional crisis, which has a direct impact on our work as treaty bodies. At the same time, the world is going through a very difficult period where we are seeing not only existing, but including increasing different forms of enforced disappearance, including what we're doing with enforced disappearances. This sparks uncertainty and people feel discouraged. However, we are not going to stray from our commitment to victims. On the contrary, I think these difficulties spur us on to redouble efforts to be more creative in complying with our mandate and strengthening cooperation with you. You have been and continue to be the vital players in terms of building standards, raising the profile of disappearances, and defending human dignity. The committee very much welcomes your contributions. I think your voices, your views guide us. Let you remind us that what's at stake and what keeps us really alive here, and that is the essence of our work, is that we need to find disappearers, protect the rights of victims, ensure this crime has no place in society. When I open this meeting, I'd like to invite you to share, very frankly, your concerns, proposals, expectations. We know that the path to truth, justice, and reparation is a long path, a difficult one. But we also know that we can only go along this path if we do it together. Victims and civil society, states, international mechanisms, a common effort, placing at the heart of this people and their dignity. So with hope and determination, thank you for being here, for your tireless struggle, and we reiterate our support. You are not alone. I'd now like to hand over to colleagues from the committee. I'd like particularly to mention those who were elected recently in July. So I'd like to give the floor. It's not alphabetic order. Mr. Jean-Didier Dibamba, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Jean-Didier Bambara from Burkina Faso. I'm a new member of this committee, and thank you very much.
Gracias, Jean-Didier.
Thank you. Maria de Finis.
Thank you. Good morning and warm welcome to all of you. My name is Maria de Finis. I'm coming from Croatia and I'm also a new member of this committee.
Gracias, Maria. Olivier.
Thank you, Olivier de Fruville. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I am, well, I should start by saying welcome. I'm Olivier de Fruville, Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you.
Gracias, Olivier.
Thank you, Olivier. Paulo Vanucci. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Paulo Vanucci. I'm a recent member, just joined from Brazil. And I hope all together we can combat the scourge of enforced disappearances. Thank you.
Paulo.
Carmen Rosa Villa Quintana. A very good morning. It's a great pleasure to see a lot of familiar faces here. Great pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm Carmen Rosa Villa Quintana. I'm from Peru, and this is my second term on the committee. I am Vice Chair.
Gracias, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen Rosa. Elias Solis, good morning. I'm Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez, and thank you for being with us. I'm a new member of the committee. Along with the chair, I want to pay tribute to your solidarity, your struggle to clarify the fate of disappeared persons from each of your respective countries. And we're here to work together to help you. Thank you.
Gracias, Elias.
Thank you, Elias Barbara Lochbihler.
Lochbihler, member of the committee, and I also welcome you and would like to thank you because like in the past also for this session we have received very good reports from several of your organizations, qualified information what happens on the ground, which really helps us to do our work here. Thank you.
Gracias, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Fidelis.
I'd also like to join my colleagues in welcoming you to this meeting. My name is Fidelis Kanyongolo. I've been a member of the committee since 2023. It's my first term, and I look forward to a discussion of mutual benefit this morning. Thank you.
Gracias, Fidelis.
Thank you, Fidelis. Mr. Matar Diop, finally. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And we welcome the presence of civil society organizations and particularly associations of victims. That, of course, is the raison d'etre of our organization. I'm Matar Diop, and I'm from Senegal.
Gracias.
Thank you, Matar. I am Juan Pablo Alban. I'm a member of the committee since 2021, and welcome to our meeting. So I want to say something about the activities that we're carrying out at the moment. But let me just say already that your statements will come later. There's going to be a list that our colleague has here. You'll be able to put your name on that list so we know who actually is going to take the floor. So there's a bit of an order of statements. So you'll find that just there, if you can put your names down. We've got some thematic projects going, and very briefly we'll touch on those, what we're working on at the time. And I want to talk about a project that has to do with enforced disappearance and transnational repression. And for that, I'd like to give the floor to Madam Barbara Lochbihler to talk about this.
And despite the fact that our committee has very limited resources financially and on meeting times, we thought because it comes up from different country situations that we thematically will work on enforced disappearances in the context of transnational repression. We don't do this alone. We had discussions with the working group on enforced and involuntary disappearances last session, and we will start working on such a joint statement and hope to finalize this within the next or 1.5 years. And you are all invited actually to contribute to this paper. So what is transnational repression? Several UN bodies and other entities have worked on that issue. The term transnational repression is increasingly used to describe state actions designed to silence dissent beyond borders. It includes killings, abductions, enforced disappearances, unlawful removals, online and offline intimidation, digital surveillance, including spyware, gender-specific attacks targeting relatives in the country of origin, abuses of consular services, and misuse of tools such as Interpol red notices. I would also like to bring to your attention that the Office of the High Commissioner this summer in June actually produced a briefing paper which is available, which has a very good description of working on a definition on that issue. So, of course, this transnational repressions has consequences for victims and host states alike. For victims and their families, transnational enforced disappearances cause profound physical, psychological, and social harm. And for the host state, such violations not only threaten the safety of residents, but also undermines sovereignty, erode trust in state institutions, and weaken the credibility of asylum and refugee protection systems. So our attention is that we will have a joint statement which condemns actually unequivocally all instances practice of transnational repression that amounts to enforced disappearance. We want to remind states that the prohibition of enforced disappearance is absolute and non-derogable. We call on host states to investigate and prosecute perpetrators, protect victims, and ensure the political or diplomatic considerations never impede justice. So these are part of the results we hope to have with this statement. And again, you are invited to send your feedback on this issue, but also if you have cases from the country situations you work in. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. We're continuing with this work with a view to adopting our second general comment. I'd now like to give the floor to Carmen Rosa to keep us abreast of what is happening with this process. Thank you, Chair, says Carmen Rosa. It's an excellent opportunity for us. As of the 27th session of our committee, we took the decision on the basis of the general document to carry out a second general comment on women, girls, and enforced disappearances. In the 28th session of our committee, we adopted a concept note, the same that was uploaded on our web page, and we made a call for contributions between May and July of this year. We've received from many organizations 60 contributions, voluntary contributions that have been analyzed. We have made that more systematic. And the focus, I have to say, is looking at prevention, search, investigation, trial, participation, protection, and reparation for economic, social, and cultural rights. I also want to highlight that 29 of these 60 contributions that were sent from Mesoamerica and the Caribbean, not many from Europe and Asia. I just wanted to flag that for those associations and organizations who'd like to participate in the upcoming meetings will be held. We're going to be having regional consultations. And in September, the 3rd of September, we had consultations with the Caribbean and Central American area. Very important. It allowed us, depending on the characteristics of the region, it allowed us to identify contexts. It allowed us to identify lessons to learn, challenges, and on the basis of that, with a view to an upcoming analysis, which we hope will be in March, then we'll be able to see what are the best elements to extract from that in order to work on the general comment. Let me say something about the goals of this general comment, and let me also say this stems from the analysis of the different working methods that our committee has had. It will be very much geared to the following. Enforced disappearances have to be addressed from an intersectional gender perspective, addressing the specific needs of girls and women as they exercise their rights. All the resources in our convention need to be made available. The idea being to support states, that you analyze the differentiated impact and that you recognize the specific circumstances and intersectional inequalities affecting compliance under the convention. And finally, I'd like to flag the work of women. They play a key role in searching for their families. They are real human rights defenders and they are female builders of peace. And their rights have to be guaranteed. The upcoming regional conference for MENA and Europe are going to be the 14th of October, 3 p.m. Geneva time, and for Asia, 28th of October, 6 a.m. Geneva time. I think that's going to be 6 p.m. Bangkok time. I hope that you will be able to participate and spread knowledge of these consultations, and hope that you'll be able to directly participate, actively participate in advance. Thank you to all those who will be participating. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the organizations.
Gracias, Carmen Rosa.
Thank you, Carmen Rosa. Yes, we've been working since the last session on a proposal with a view to adopting a declaration on enforced disappearance and people who belong to different sexual or gender identities. We've decided to press on with this. We did this last week. We will be drawing up a call for contributions, which will also be made public, probably March next. And we hope, again, you'll be able to support us both in dissemination of this and also providing us with information so that we can build our declaration of principle. The reason why we've decided on this is because it happens quite frequently, the disappearance of individuals with different gender or sexual identities and different sexual orientation. It has to do with how one registers the phenomenon, the difficulties that they have and have to face in terms of the search, how they can get reparation, and also the family members, the relatives. Sometimes they're not the biological family who do this. It's what I call the chosen family. The challenges of human identification when we are talking about people who belong to different sexual identities and how societal perception can affect the search identification process and indeed the reparation process for these sorts of cases. So the idea is to develop general principles for these cases pertaining to investigation, search, reparation and identification. Now, we're not just working on these thematic projects, we are also carrying out the mandate already conferred on us on the basis of Article 29. We look at the state reports and we continue with the follow-up work and the recording of urgent actions. We continue with our individual communications for those countries that have accepted the competence of the committee to look at individual communications. And we have pending 2 visits, still pending. They've been accepted by Honduras and Burkina Faso, but sadly, the financial and liquidity situation of the UN prevents us from actually having clarity as to when we can carry out those visits. And we have open procedure at the moment. Really, it's the committee trying to look at whether they should apply Article 34 to a particular state party. That is still pending. Quite apart from the activities we carry out, you probably know in January this year, there was the first ever World Congress on Enforced Disappearances. A range of very important stakeholders, both civil society, states, victims associations, did enter into many commitments there. And just to say what's happened since January, and indeed the future of these pledges as part of the World Congress, I'd like to hand over in that regard to Olivier de Froville, who will be explaining what happened there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure a lot of the people here this morning actually directly participated, or perhaps online participated in the World Congress. This was a collective initiative, many stakeholders involved, organized by the Convention of Enforced Disappearance Initiative, bringing together both state parties to the convention, experts, and as we've heard, also family members of disappeared persons, and also the High Commissioner for Human Rights and other partners. It was a success, I believe, as a Congress. I think one of the challenges was to bring together all the stakeholders, all the actors involved in combating enforced disappearances after the adoption of the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. So if you like, it was to really get the whole momentum back on track to combat enforced disappearances. Many exchanges of views, really important. I think what we all heard was, first of all, we were all struck by what victims had to say. There were many different panels. Messages of love were expressed, but at the same time, commitments and pledges taken. Very much action-oriented as a Congress, focused on an action plan, a range of actions for the stakeholders, be they civil society or states. Commitments emerged, 5 international and regional organizations, 25 civil society organizations, 2 human rights institutions, and 4 academic institutions were involved. One of the key actions that emerged from the Congress, I'll just mention these key actions, have a victim-oriented network created, particularly where you don't have coordination between organizations combating this. A world organization of young people, in order we need to get the new generations involved. Regular meetings of women looking for disappeared people, that was another one. Promotion and ratification of the convention, and capacity building of civil society organizations, and to facilitate their interaction with protection mechanisms. These are key commitments and conclusions, particularly stemming from the workshops, the regional workshops held. Since then, there have been a range of events. We've had commemorations, conferences, an expert seminar on combating impunity, bringing together experts and how you prosecute perpetrators, including the whole extraterritorial issue. The 15th of October, there will be a conference, an online conference, with the support of the International Association of Judges on the 15th of October from 3 p.m. onwards. Tools for Justice and Accountability is its title. Universal criminal jurisdiction, just to spark more reflection on how we combat impunity and this whole notion of extraterritorial competence. And then there's going to be the Geneva Peace Week, which will be held as of the 15th of October. There will be a conference on the searching for disappeared persons, key component of peace, focusing on the Syrian example. These are just some of the follow-up activities, just to say that, broadly speaking, these key commitments, well, I can't say that there's been anything very hard and fast from states. Since the Congress, there's been no new pledge regarding ratification of the convention, even during a meeting that was held just a few days ago on this. So we need to renew the call for a broadening of the Friends of the Convention group. Civil society could also do that, and discussions with their states, and encourage states to join this group of Friends of the Convention to really strengthen the convention. And civil society players also need to see how their activities and their future schedule and programming can ensure effective follow-up. Because I think the time for words is past. It's now time for deeds. And I think during this very difficult period, many obstacles in our way, there needs to be hope. I mean, the hope was sparked in this Congress, and I don't think we want the momentum to fall since that was sparked in the Congress. Thank you. The Chair, thank you, Olivier. Just to close from the committee, I wanted to say something on the follow-up to the chairperson's meeting and the impact of the liquidity crisis. I think it's very important for those of you who use the treaty body system are apprised of how our activities are endangered. I'm going to be handing back to Olivier de Frueville on this one, just to mention a few ideas, and then I will complement what he has to say with my closing comments, and then, of course, the floor will be yours. Olivier, you have the floor again. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. I had an opportunity to chair the chairperson's meeting last June. The context, of course, is that of the liquidity crisis. It affects not only the UN, but disproportionately affects the human rights programs that is the most underfunded pillar of the UN, 6.6% of the overall budget for human rights. And for many years now, the treaty body system itself has been plunged into a structural crisis. Many attempts have been made to try to change the system, but no solution really has been found. It's been exacerbated by the liquidity crisis, which is unprecedented. The third meeting, the third week has been cancelled. The pre-sessional groups have been cancelled. Also cancelling of visits. I'm thinking of the SPT in particular. This means that we've had to defer the examination of 35 state party reviews. 120 individual communications have had to be put off for individual communications. Many drafts come into the Secretariat. They're not even recorded or registered because of this, if they're only going to be reviewed in 2 years' time. So this crisis simply exacerbates the existing crisis. It's not just an assault on the actual operating of the treaty body system. It's an assault on the positive outcomes that come from treaty bodies in terms of oversight, protection, shedding light on situations. So it's pretty bad news for human rights more broadly. As for the committee, as you've just said yourself, 2 scheduled visits for 2025 that didn't happen. No prospect for future funding for the urgent action, which is terribly underfunded and always was, and hasn't been taken up by the General Assembly resolution as we anticipated. These are very tangible measures because urgent actions, let's not forget, save lives, saves people's lives. So treaty bodies have proposed some exceptional measures, but really would like to call on states to try to address this liquidity crisis for those countries in particular who aren't paying their contributions, and for those states who are not paying enough or paying too late, but also for other states to find effective solutions so that the human rights program and the treaty body remains in place.
Gracias, Olivier. Solo para complementar.
Thank you, Olivier. Just to add to what Olivier was explaining, you'll know that the UN is celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, and obviously one of the important aspects there, and one of the most fundamental pillars of the UN's work is the human rights program and the various human rights mechanisms, not just the treaty bodies, but the special procedures as well, and other specialized agencies responsible for the issue of human rights. Of course, we can't fully shelter ourselves from the seriousness of the storm rocking the United Nations, but obviously, notwithstanding that, what we do will reflect the priorities that we have and the nation states have in this area. And we believe that it's essential in all of this that civil society and other victims organizations and so forth raise up their voices to call on states to submit the resources and provide the international human rights system with the necessary resources as a precondition for people to access the international system and the protection mechanisms. And that obviously also allows them to operate effectively. We're not just talking about paying lip service to this process. We want to carry out effective human rights protection, and the states understand that when they commit to a treaty, they're shouldering a serious commitment. It doesn't only relate to observing their responsibilities individually, but guaranteeing the effectiveness of the mechanisms. They are independent bodies. They are bodies of a legal nature. They are independent. They are set on by experts who are responsible for oversight of international instruments, but also responsible for supporting states to comply with their obligations. So this is a tool not only to support accountability concerning violations that have taken place, but also that relates to prevention. And in the current global context, with the serious backsliding we're seeing in the area of human rights, it's essential that they continue to operate. The treaty body chairs have regretted that the General Assembly hasn't taken the necessary steps to ensure that the treaty body strengthening process comes to an end. That's the process that started with Resolution 68268, that there's not actually a calendar in place, that there's not a review process set in stone, that we haven't been able to ensure the proper predictability of the system with the appropriate accountability and transparency. And so we would like you to become our allies in calling on those states to redouble their efforts and move towards and close the strengthening process that began with that Resolution 68268 in order to bolster the effectiveness of the treaty bodies to the benefit, of course, above all, of the victims who are the foremost affected by the compliance with those tasks by the treaty bodies. So that basically concludes our discussion of the situation from our perspective, and we will now open up the floor for contributions according to the list we have. The first organization that registered themselves is AXFI. We've allocated a maximum time of 3 minutes for each of the statements. I'm sorry we can't provide any more time, but that's the situation. So you have the floor.
شكرا. Self. Sorry. صباح الخير. I am عبد الجواد أحمد.
A very good afternoon, everybody.
And human right from Egypt. I am thanks for this invitation, this very important meeting. I will speak by Arabic to keep the time. أنا كمؤسسة أهلية.
I represent a non-governmental organization responsible for fair trials. And we would like to reiterate our full-throated support to your committee, particularly as regards the appeal, we need to put out 2 states to comply with their financial obligations.
بالإسراع بإنشاء
contact the relevant government authority we'd like to see that draft law, provision number 40, brought into force. We also call for an explicit authorization for all those who are detained to contact a lawyer and the relevant authorities, and all of this will significantly reduce, we believe, cases of enforced disappearance. On behalf of Egyptian civil society, I would say that we make every effort to respond to your recommendations, because prevention, of course, is indeed far more effective than addressing any situation subsequently. The next speaker, please.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Raya Jami. I'm a survivor of enforced disappearance and a family member of a disappeared person, because my mother disappeared in 1984 and remains disappeared, and her fate is still unknown. I worked between 1987 up until 1991. I was
où nous pouvons travailler sur la récupération de la mémoire collective,
which we could work on collective and individual memory preservation, or to work on supporting victims, because there are thousands of us, despite the fact that we are a relatively small people living in this territory. We have we've suffered beyond imagining as a result of crimes such as enforced disappearance. So I'd like to draw all of your attention and draw the committee's attention, and my greetings go to the committee. I'd like this situation to be recognized, because the families, all the victims are not recognized. The Western Saharan Society for Victims isn't recognized, and they're trying to deal with very serious crimes committed by the Moroccan states. We have called again and again for this to be properly recognized. But the most important thing is that we can find a space in our country where we can actually come together to work in dignity in an appropriate environment. And so this whole context is extremely confounding. There's no consultation that took place with us when Morocco was drafting its report, or when it does prepare its reports. It sometimes calls in people and organizations who have nothing to do with either the victims or the victims' families. And we're there, ready and available in the right location, but they do not communicate with us, and they don't give us a space to share our perspective. All of the detention centres that where enforced disappearance existed were all destroyed. That was done by the state, and these spaces constitute a part of our collective and individual memory, for example. So I would be very grateful to you if you could draw Morocco's attention to the importance of giving us some space that we can express our perspective directly. Thank you. The Chair, thank you very much. I'd now like to pass the floor to Fedefam, please. Distinguished committee members, the Latin American Federation of Families of Disappeared Detainees extends its warm greetings and welcomes the new members of this committee. Our intervention today wishes to focus on the removal of babies and young children without the consent of their parents committed during dictatorships, armed conflicts, or systematic violence. This constitutes a form of enforced disappearance and, in many cases, a crime against humanity, according to international law. Unfortunately, Latin America has a number of different examples of this event. For example, Guatemala, El Salvador, Colombia, Argentina, and Chile. There are many others that are not on this list because there isn't a proper registration of cases, or the cases have been hidden deliberately by states, and then there is a failure in organization because of the precariousness of victims and the isolation of indigenous communities. All of this confounds data collection. The responses of the majority of states have also been insufficient for victims, and this includes in those cases where we have seen significant progress in the area of search and recognition, but we are seeing a very concerning backsliding. This is happening in Argentina, for example, at the moment. We would like to call on this committee to maintain its focus on this area and bring to bear all the mechanisms at its disposal to support and encourage states to comply with their commitments in the sphere of human rights with a view to strengthening and guaranteeing search in an appropriate context. We'd like to speak particularly today on behalf of two organisations, and my colleague will continue at this stage. A very good afternoon to the committee, and thank you very much for hearing me. We'd like to submit a report from the Stolen Children, or the association which is called All Stolen Children Are My Children. This is a report which goes back to the 2021 period, which was the last report that the committee had with Spain, and our report relates to judiciary and also the legislature. In the latter, we've worked on a law relating in Spain to stolen children and the establishment of a special prosecutor's office, as well as a state commission on the right to identity and a database, and a DNA bank which is free and accessible to victims, as well as official recognition for all victims, both in the Franco era and the subsequent era. In terms of the law on memory and democracy, that's 2021 law, we consider there's been progress, but there are still serious limitations. These include access to a DNA bank. The chair interrupts. I'm sorry, we will have to cut it, but we do have the report and we will absolutely study that report. Thank you very much. The thing is that our time is very limited. I do apologize, says the chair. The Catalan Institute for Peace, please. Hello, a very good afternoon to everybody. We are a public institution headquartered in Barcelona, working to preserve the culture of peace. And at the center of our strategy and our work are the victims of violence in conflicts and people who want to construct a world with more social justice. We recognize that the current context confronts us with a series of painful challenges. But in that, we can't forget causes which for many years haven't had the attention they warrant. And these include enforced disappearances, and this is why we're here. We want to appreciate the committee's work and the various entities that are represented here. In that vein, for years, we've been working to increase visibility of female searchers as peace builders. And we've organized a number of meetings with searchers from different countries and brought them together. We'd like to contribute what the outcome of that is and what the road forwards is. We want to raise further visibility of women's councils and ensure that victims are at the centre of the process. This isn't only expressed through figures, but also the content of discussions and proposals. It's essential to share this shared agenda and express our commitment and call for greater effort to implement that agenda. And specifically, our commitment stands firm as regards item 2 of the Congress, which was to organise annual meetings for female searchers. We are working with the goal of organising a new encounter, a new meeting, either at the end of 2026 or the beginning of 2027, and that will seek to open up spaces of mutual recognition. And we'd like to call on the committee as a result and on all organisations who are stakeholders to join forces and contact us so that we have the necessary resources. We have the resources to organise a small meeting, but it would be great to be able to organise a much larger meeting, bringing in more stakeholders. And so we want to not lose sight of our shared humanity and give dignity to those who are searching for their loved ones in love and empathy in their search for truth and justice. So we want to recall all of that and don't want to pass over the opportunity to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much. Join forces for our disappeared people in Carawila. Next, please.
Hace 18 años.
18 years ago, the beginning was cut off, unfortunately. We come from the north of Mexico, from a community in the north of Mexico. And we feel it's very important to be here with you to convey our thanks and our thanks to the United Nations as well, and to this committee and to other bodies under the aegis of the OHCHR who have always supported our work and followed up our requests as we represent the collectives, the families and the victims. This is why we're here. As you know, the committee asked Mexico to apply Article 34, but that hasn't been done, and this is illustrated by the sheer scale of the disappeared in Mexico. Since from 2006 to 2025, there have been 62,000 bodies that remain unidentified. There's a very serious disappearance crisis gripping the country, and the Mexican state hasn't really pulled out the stops, to be honest, to resolve this serious crisis. On the contrary, when the committee asked it to begin with the Article 34 procedure, it had a very aggressive response from the state of Mexico, based on denial and providing a lot of fig leaf explanations. Various civil society organizations and collectives have come together to highlight the application of Article 34 shouldn't be seen as a kind of judgment or an attack on the government. It should be seen as a fantastic, extraordinary opportunity in an extraordinary context to protect everybody against enforced disappearance. The Mexican state should establish the causes of the disappearances with a national disappearance program, and it should duly prosecute those who have perpetrated enforced disappearance and protect the families. We do greet the committee's resolutions, and to those who are present, we'd like to say that victims of disappearance in Mexico and their family members that we're representing here today do need international solidarity if they are one day to be able to attain truth and justice. Thank you ever so much. The Chair, thank you very much. I'd now like to pass the floor to the Observer Human Rights Centre, please.
Thank you. شكرا رئيس الجلسة.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our thoughts with you. This is a very important opportunity for Iraq. I am the head of the Human Rights Observatory in Iraq, and I'm very grateful for your invitation to come here and discuss the crime of enforced disappearance. It is sadly a crime that is widespread in Iraq. Over recent decades, cases of enforced disappearance have been reported independently of regular changes in the military, security, and police context. This issue is usually accompanied with questions, unanswered questions from family members of victims who have no clarity regarding the fate of their loved ones. There are signs demonstrating that, unfortunately, there are enforced disappearance centres that continue to operate. And very frankly, we're first of all highlighting the genuine commitment of the Iraqi government and whether or not that exists to clarify the fate of disappeared victims, and secondly, their will to provide solutions and reparation for families. The international community, we believe, must work to set up an investigation commission into enforced disappearance in Iraq, and the Iraqi government also needs to bring its legislation into line with international standards. This will streamline our work and that of civil society as a whole in Iraq. We're very grateful to you in advance for making those recommendations. Thank you. Thank you very much. Human Line Foundation now, please.
السلام عليكم. أني داليا محمود المعماري من مؤسسة الخط الإنساني.
Thank you very much. My name is Dalia Mamami Afar, and I am the daughter of somebody who was disappeared by Daesh. My father disappeared in 2014. I was 18 years old at the time. And now that Daesh is no longer ruling us, we set up an association of victims that disappeared, and we're working to try and determine the fate of the disappeared. We continue to raise awareness and we continue to look for our loved ones. The government's commitment is very slow. We're very grateful to Carmen, to the committee for visiting Iraq. They demonstrated a great deal of empathy to the families of the disappeared. I'm one of those people. After the visit, we had a budget put in place to reopen cemeteries to try and identify the remains of disappeared victims, and there were a number of reports that were drafted following that, which are a source of hope. On the 17th of August this year, the government did make good on its commitment to families, and there were some mass graves that were opened up. As a result, the largest mass grave was Al-Kasfar grave. Our family members are in that mass grave, and we would like to call on the committee to closely monitor that situation, because following your visit, there was a real strength lent to our arm in terms of our voices, and we want to really establish the whereabouts of our family members. Thank you. The chat, thank you very much. The floor is now given to Tedrick for human rights.
نعم سيد الرئيس بداية.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We really appreciate your committee's efforts, and particularly the efforts you make to come to the aid of civil society and governments in Iraq. It's essential that we can turn the page in Iraq, because my country continues to suffer the scourge and consequences of the conflict that has rocked the country for these 5 last decades. During that period, innumerable people were disappeared. And we recognize that policies have been set up to combat crimes in this area, for example, to try and establish the whereabouts where a number of the disappeared are located, but the results have not been as hoped. It requires an enormous budget from a governmental point of view to do this work, and we know obviously very well that Iraq continues to experience an acute economic crisis that is preventing government efforts from moving forwards as they try to find the disappeared. We need obviously to focus on points of hope, both locally and internationally, and there have been some signs of hope. There have been reports which have been published with some significant recommendations, but we are hoping that the Ministry of Justice will move forwards in order to pass a bill and take actions to reduce the number of disappeared whose fate is unknown. And we would like to work and have the intention of working with all bodies, both government bodies and civil society, so that we might work together to be able to combat this scourge. We call on all those present here with us today to come to Iraq's aid in order to allow us to tackle such a painful and thorny issue. Thank you. The chair couldn't be heard.
Thank you, Chair. I would like, first of all, to warmly congratulate you and the newly elected members, and thanks those members whose term have come to an end, including former chair. My intervention also concerned the situation of enforced disappearances in Iraq. You may know that there are about 1 million disappeared persons in the country. The key features of the current situation of enforced disappearances in Iraq can be summarized as follows. First, the Iraqi government continues to deny the existence of enforced disappearances in the present day, insisting that the issue is a matter of the past. This position has led to develop a legal framework that addressed only past cases of all human rights violations, including enforced disappearances. As a result of that, all the state efforts and resources were directed to deal with the past, neglecting human rights violations after 2003. And there is no legal framework now on the ground to deal with the enforced disappearances cases. And that's why probably the committee will have observed that Iraq has made no meaningful progress in implementation of its recommendation over the past decade. On the contrary, there has been a marked regression in the state approach. Not only does it refuse to address contemporary cases, but it also rejects the very term enforced disappearances and insisting to use the term missing person. Second, civil society has been systematically excluded from the state-suggested efforts. In Iraq's most recent report to the committee, Additional Information of October 2024, there is no reference at all to the role of the civil society organization in any of the measures or activities that the state claims to have undertaken. Even the term civil society or NGOs has never been mentioned in the entire report. Furthermore, organizations working on an issue related to enforced disappearances are so often face threats. As a result, some have been compelled to commemorate the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances under alternative title, the International Day of the Missing. Alarmingly, even the International Committee of the Red Cross in Iraq has adopted this practice, reportedly due to the government official refusal of attending a meeting on enforced disappearances. Third and last, there has been
I'm sorry,
third and
we don't have much time and we still have certain online interventions. So thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry to having to interrupt. We also have requests for questions online, so I'm going to read them from Egypt, from the National Human Rights Institution. Could the committee elaborate on the most effective methodologies for an NHRI to use in mapping domestic legislation, such as our penal and criminal procedure codes, against the provisions of the Convention? What specific articles of a convention most frequently require dedicated domestic legislative action, and what are examples of best practices you have seen from other states in the process? Given our mandate to receive and investigate complaints of alleged enforced disappearance, what specific investigative techniques and standards of proof does the committee recommend for NHRI to effectively document such cases, especially in complex situations where state authorities may deny custody? Second question from Lebanon. I'm Sarah Youssef, a lawyer representing the Lebanese Center for Human Rights. I would like to raise the importance of Lebanon's ratification of the International Convention. Despite the adoption of Law 105/218 on enforced disappearance and the recent election of the National Committee, Lebanon has still not ratified the convention. Ratification would not only strengthen domestic accountability, but would also ensure that Lebanon is held responsible for the proper implementation of the law and the protection of victims' rights. My question is, how can the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, in cooperation with OHCHR, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, and national human rights institutions, exert stronger advocacy and pressure to encourage Lebanon to ratify the convention without further delay? Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Well, I wanted to turn to my colleagues. Does anybody wish to take the floor regarding these questions and comments? One was on methodology for developing domestic legislation, normative development locally, and good practices for investigating and documenting cases. Madam Carmen Rosa, you have the floor. Good morning again, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for being here today. It's extremely important that we're able to have this meeting once a year. At least we don't have many meeting days, and that's why it's so important to hear from you, hear your concerns. Our dialogues with civil society organizations and with victims allow us to see the scale and the seriousness of enforced disappearance in respective countries. We know that you're constantly in contact with these people, and we know what you're doing in order to get the truth, in order to strive for justice, ensure reparation. But more important than all this are the measures of non-repetition. We know full well that enforced disappearances have occurred in many of your countries. We also know that there are many challenges to get the truth, to get the perpetrators brought to justice, and ensure that there are comprehensive reparations for each and every of the relatives and each and every of the victims. Because for years, of course, these family members are living the absence. They are suffering the fact that they don't have their loved ones with them. And what's really important to see your faces and hear what you have to say. As to the concerns expressed by the National Human Rights Commission just now, I think it's very important what you want to know. How are we to carry out, or how are you to carry out actions to ensure that, and let's not forget, this is vital for a human rights institution, how are you to really carry out the Paris Principles, and how the National Human Rights Institution can actually carry out its work. And I don't think there is sufficient time now to share with you everything on this. I mean, we've all got different experiences as countries. I don't know, maybe we could have a webinar, I don't know, something tangible that could be held so that we could really satisfy the concerns expressed by Egypt on this. We don't have sufficient time now because there were so many, and so they were really important questions from Egypt. But I think it's very important to say Lebanon, how can Lebanon ratify the convention? What can be done there? The concerted action between civil society organizations can actually achieve far more than you might initially think, where you work consistently, coherently, you turn to your governments and say, look, ratification of the convention shouldn't be just an aspiration. No, it has to be a reality. So just briefly, you are the ones, you have the power. You actually have more power, infinite power, more than you recognize in finding a course to ensure that there is ratification. And this was mentioned regarding Lebanon, not just Lebanon. We have many countries that should be party to this convention. So, I mean, let's just remain in the realm of aspiration. I think I wanted to say to you, you are the voice here, the voice for ratification from more countries, sharing experiences by sharing lessons learned, but also saying to the world, no more enforced disappearances, it has to end. We don't want to see this. We've had the past one. We don't want any more present ones. We certainly don't want any more future ones. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen Rosa. Madam Barbara Lochwiller, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I would like to come back on the situation of Iraq. We have received written feedback from civil society organizations in Iraq. Thank you for this. And for those who had not enough time to present it here, you can also give it to us in writing. I am one of the rapporteurs on Iraq. We have a new rapporteur in this committee, is Juan Pablo Alban, because the previous one is no longer on the committee. So on our agenda this session, we will adopt a list of themes on enforced disappearance in Iraq, which will then be the basis for the next dialogue with the government. We don't know exactly when we will have it, because of the sources. So your input is very relevant. I also would like to refer you to read the urgent action report our committee is doing to the General Assembly. There, it's urgent action are individual cases the committee is dealing with. And it also refers to quite a lot of, to all urgent actions in Iraq. And it comments on the different trends we have on this. So I refer you to those two. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Le doy la palabra.
Thank you. Mr. Fidelis Rangola, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think my response is related to the intervention from Egypt on the methodology of alignment of legislation to the obligations under the convention. As Carmen said, it's perhaps too broad a question to be answered, but I wanted a very specific aspect of the question, which is what is the most recurrent issue that arises with respect to alignment of legislation to convention obligations? And I wanted to say that one of the things that keeps coming up is the failure of states to create enforced disappearance as an autonomous criminal offense under Article 4, as required by Article 4. Quite often, states will say that they don't need an autonomous offense because they already have other offenses within their criminal justice system, such as kidnapping, abduction, and so on. So I think just to answer that specific issue about what is the recurring, it's almost invariable in almost every situation that one of the issues that arises is the state's failure to actually create the offense of enforced disappearance as an autonomous standalone offense. And I think this is one aspect in the methodology of alignment that perhaps civil society and others might wish to work on, to keep insisting that this must be created as a specific offense and that the existence of similar or allied offenses is not adequate to discharge the state's obligation under Article 4 of the Convention. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Fidelis.
Thank you, Fidelis. Just to take up what Fidelis and Carmen Rosa have just said, by way of answer to the questions from the online participants, in 2023, there was a publication of a practical guide as to how to become a state party to the convention. Of course, this guide is for states, but it does provide information that's quite important information also for CSOs. You can use that in order to perhaps persuade them to adhere. And in the practical guide, it refers to how a state can be party to the convention, and part of that is to ensure its domestic legislation is in line with the treaty body legislation. It also says what norms and standards require local legal development and how far legislative provisions should go domestically. In 2022, if my memory serves me well, we did have a meeting with authorities from the Lebanese state. Members who were present at that meeting, I think Karen Rossa was there at that time, and we said to the legislative and the judiciary and the executive of that country what actions are necessary for ratification. The committee naturally is interested in having more member states so that there is more robust protection for people, to protect them against enforced disappearance. But our intervention, unfortunately, given the nature of what we do, is restricted to simply explaining, supporting, providing technical support. But we can't be militants, if you like. We can't be activists, because then we will be the ones who are responsible for judging the implementation. I don't think I can see any further requests for the floor from members, so I'd like to make the most of the final part of our meeting to restate our commitment to what you do, to thank you yet again for all the information you provide us with. Thank you for the activities you carry out on the ground. You are our eyes, you are our ears on the ground, and we wouldn't know what would be happening if it weren't for you. So the cooperation with civil society is absolutely vital. It's that cooperation that allows us to carry out our work effectively. Now, I don't want to say much more now because I believe there's another request for the floor, if I'm not mistaken. So who would like to take the floor again?
Gracias a nuestra secretaría.
And thank you to the Secretariat.
Le voy a dar la palabra.
So I'll be giving the floor to Ismail. Ismail Musek. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak to you on behalf of the Eritrean Coordination for Human Rights and also the Eritreans in the diaspora to bring to your attention the most recent acts of enforced disappearances in Eritrea. On the 22nd of July, 2025, two respected religious leaders from the seat of Ginda, Sheikh Adam Shaban and Sheikh Hassan Shaneti and his son, were summoned by the authorities. Since that moment, they have not been seen and their families are left in anguish. This disappearance was immediately reported to the Special Rapporteur, and further submissions will be made once all information regarding the fate of these individuals is gathered. Tragically, this disappearance was followed by the closure of a major Islamic institution in Ginda, where more than 1,000 students were enrolled. The administrator of the Ginda subzone who sought information about the two sheikhs has himself vanished. His whereabouts remain unknown. Several women teachers from the school were also taken into custody for several days before being released. Mr. Chair, sadly, this is not an isolated case. It's part of a consistent and deliberate policy of repression pursued by the Eritrean government since 1991. Enforced disappearances took place in 1991-92 and have continued almost every year since then. Religious institutions were forcibly closed. These actions are not accidents. They form a part of a systemic campaign to empower a population, to destroy social cohesion, and to erase cultural and religious heritage. The scale of repression has sparked a wave of resistance over the past weeks. Eritreans have mobilized through organized protests in London, Stockholm, Paris, and other places. Yet the government have responded with silence and contempt. Its embassies refuse to engage with their citizens, closing the doors and forcing petitions to deliver their demands through letterboxes. Mr. Chair, the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea and the Special Rapporteur, including the most recent reports of this year, have documented patterns of arbitrary detention, torture, enforced disappearances, and prosecution. The government has had decades to change course, but it has shown time and again that it will not listen, will not engage, and has no political will to reform. Eritrea has not ratified the International Convention for the Protection of All Enforced Disappearances. It has ignored the repeated recommendations of the Council and continues to operate in complete defiance of international law. This is not a government committed to dialogue. It's a government that treats international scrutiny with contempt. We therefore condemn, in the strongest possible terms, the actions of the Eritrean government. We urge this committee and the Council to demand the immediate release of Sheikh Adam Shaban, Sheikh Hassan Shaneti, and all others who have been forcibly disappeared, to strengthen the mechanisms for monitoring and accountability, including considerations for referral to international judicial bodies, press Eritrea to ratify the Convention on Enforced Disappearances and to cooperate with the human rights mechanism without delay or condition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Considerando que
We've got a few minutes left, so I'd like to give the floor back. Madam, I think you had additional points to raise. I just wanted to give you some information on the situation of those illegally adopted in Chile. For decades, thousands of children born in Chile were separated from their families through deceit, coercion, falsifying documents, and sent for adoption within and outside the country without the free informed consent of their mothers. We know that it didn't just happen. There were networks, deliberate networks involving officials making the most of the poverty and vulnerability of very young women. On the 2nd of June 2025, the Chilean judges actually went through the legal procedure, including illegal adoptions, asking for the extradition of an ex-judge who was accused of being part of this network in San Fernando in the 1980s. This is a landmark, and this recognizes the existence of a real organization that removed babies, handing them over to families who were very often foreign families through payment and falsified documents. For women such as Ruth Reyes, who was a mother who looked for her son for 4 decades. This news came too late. She actually passed away in July 2025, just a little time after the fact that the court actually took the step that the families were looking for. And only 2 weeks after that, she would have been able to find her son over the web. So I'm skipping on now to my conclusions. What do we need now? First of all, we need clear recognition that when there is removal and the fact that the people are hiding the whereabouts of these children and the denial of providing information, these constitute enforced disappearances of girls and boys. Secondly, the accelerated implementation of the DNA public bank, which needs the proper timetable, budget, and governance incorporating victims, which is interoperable with bases in Sweden, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, the United States, and Australia. All these countries took in these adopted children. Thirdly, priority and safe opening of civilian files and archives, health, judicial, and ecclesiastic ones with national access protocols and custody. And finally, we need to have effective judicial cooperation for all the measures to be taken, mutual assistance and extradition, with a gender approach, looking also at children, childhood, and interculturality. These measures are in line with the standards established by UN experts and given the recent judicial progress in Chile. Sorry, I really apologize. No, I really do have to cut you off, madam. I am sorry. I have to hand back to Geneva International Center for Justice, because I know you weren't able to finish your statement either.
Thank you, Chair. My last point was the disturbing rise in hate speech and the smear campaigns led by parliamentarian and pro-government media figures in Iraq. These campaigns stigmatize all disappeared persons as terrorists, brand their families as families of terrorists, and accuse organizations and activists working on the issues of enforced disappearances as supporting terrorists. And for your information, supporting terrorists in Iraq, people who accuse of that may face prison from 7 and 15 years probably. Thus, I will reiterate again the crucial role of the Committee of Enforced Disappearances, its follow-up to the situation of enforced disappearances in Iraq. Thank you.
Bien, voy a dar la palabra.
Just for a final brief comment, Commissioner for Fair Trial.
شكرا. أنا بس من واقع عملي كمنظمة
Thank you. As the representative of our NGO and as lawyer active in the area of human trafficking and others, and including mutual legal assistance, there is a phenomenon in Egypt, and that will give you an idea of what's happening in the country. Older persons, including men and women, they don't have ID documents. If these people die or if they have any accident, many of these individuals simply die. Many of them go to hospitals. Some are put into psychiatric hospitals, but they don't have an ID, no identity. That means also that there are cases of enforced disappearances. I see what's happening in the country, and I think it's important that we analyze the reality and the facts on the ground. And I think the state must, for instance, give the names of corpses, people who've died simply because of traffic accidents, let's say, or people who die in psychiatric hospitals. There's a difference between those who disappear because of psychiatric problems and those, for instance, just because of traffic accidents. They actually disappear if there's no idea. So our government should always divulge the identity of these individuals through, for instance, their fingerprints or other DNA measures. Thank you. Well, we really appreciated the possibility of talking with you today. And naturally, we're open to taking in any contributions you wish to send to us in writing, particularly those countries that might be going through a review in our committee. Having said that, and with an eye on the clock, I think we've just about finished this meeting, so the meeting stands adjourned.
you.